What's going on, everybody? It's been a day or two. It's been a long time. I missed you. Have you missed me? So there's been some horrifying developments on the Georgia election front. It turns out that the Fulton County, in their recount, may have scanned 3,000 ballots twice, and my guess is those 3,000 ballots didn't help President Trump. Let's find out together. We can go a little faster here. This did happen on, as the stream says, 5/7. We're live here today right now, but this stream was in 8 hours.
The great citizens of Georgia.
Please.
Our administrator, Alexandra, and our executive director, Mike Cohn,
Let's
for all the
watch
hard
together.
work that they do. I've grown to appreciate that a lot
What's
over the
up,
last
chat?
4 months, and now having a second job in addition to my primary one, apparently. While we may not always agree, I've learned that every member of this board is dedicated to serving the citizens of Georgia, and I am honored to serve with each of them. We have a long 2 days ahead of us, so let's get started with the meeting. Our first item on the agenda is approval of board meeting minutes from the State Election Board meeting and hearings on February 13th, 2024, a copy of which is in the board members' packets, and hopefully they have reviewed. Are there any questions from the board pertaining to the, which one are you two?
Pin that message. So
Yeah, I'm
people know
not a
what they're
technology
getting
guy,
into
so
when they
let's do this.
scroll on past.
Corrections to the minutes,
Let's
Mr.
get
Chairman,
comfortable, chat.
from February 13th. SEB 2022-109, Fulton County primary recertification. The vote was 3 yea and 1 nay for correction. SEB 2022-348, statewide precinct scanner issues. The vote was 3 yea and 1 nay. SEB 2022-222, certification, EAC certification. The vote passed 3-1. Correction.
Are there any other corrections that the board sees?
Subject to those corrections, Your Honor. Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the minutes, subject to Dr. Johnson's amendments.
We have a motion to approve the minutes subject to Dr. Johnson's corrections. Is there a second?
Second.
Just come
Second,
on
Dr.
in,
Johnson.
chat. Let me
Any
know what's
discussion?
happening.
Hearing no discussion, all those members in favor of approving the minutes with
We're
the
at
corrections stated by Dr. Johnson,
1.5
signify by
speed
saying aye.
right now.
Aye.
We'll slow
Any
it down
opposition?
when it
Hearing no
gets to
opposition,
the
so
good
moved.
stuff.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the board minutes from the State Election Board Emergency Meeting on March 28th, 2024, a copy of which is in the board's binder. Are there any comments or corrections about those minutes?
Move to accept the minutes.
We have a motion from Board Member Lindsay to accept the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Member Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes of the State Election Board Emergency Meeting on March 28th, 24, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, so moved. The next item on the agenda is public comments. There was a sign-up sheet prior to your entrance today. For
Let's
those.
make sure we're
Mr. Chairman, if I have
All
your
the way
leave, I
up
would
the
like to
volume.
make a motion under a new business prior to going to public comments.
The chair will hear your motion.
I would like to move that our currently scheduled meeting in October, which is currently on the calendar for October 15th, that we move the date of that to October 8th, because October 15th is the first day of early voting for the general election. So my motion is that our October meeting be held on Tuesday, October 8th.
There is a motion by Board Member Gazal to change the date of the October meeting from October 15th to October 8th.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Board Member Johnston. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of moving the October 15th board meeting to October the 8th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, so moved. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comment. We have received a list of people who have signed up for public comment. They'll be called out by our executive director. I ask that each of you limit your comments to 2 minutes. I
See what
personally
kind of
believe in brevity,
comments the
and I
public's
think that
got.
hopefully we can get as many people as possible. We'll
County,
limit the total time to
Georgia.
1 hour. I would have been provided with a stop clock up here to tell when the 2 minutes is over, and at the end of 2 minutes, I will lightly
Great
tap the gavel so that you know that your time has
dishonor.
expired, and I ask you to please be considerate of those others here, and limit your time to 2 minutes.
All right. I want to again thank everybody for being here. We're going to start with, and I want to apologize in advance if I butcher your name. I'm trying to read your writing, so please forgive me if I mess your name up. But Susan Opperseth? Opperseth? Just come up here to the podium, please. Yeah,
I have this stopwatch, and at the end of 2 minutes, I'll,
okay. David Sumrall, you be ready next. He'll be next.
Good morning. My name is Susan Opershuth from Fulton County. Last spring, I was elected to what I thought was a political party position at the state level. I later discovered that the powers that be in the state, including your body and your bosses, have authorized a private corporation of like name to run the show. And my name was never added to the state governing committee list for any Republican apparatus at all. This is against, as you know, strict requirements of Georgia election law. In fact, there are no governing body members registered with your elections division. So what we have here is a missing political party. We have no legally filed state Republican party in Georgia. So how is it that we are even discussing the requirements of election compliance in this room today upon what is literally a private corporation? We have sent numerous ORRs to the Secretary of State requesting the required documents of our political party. We have never received them. I have personally visited the Secretary of State's General Counsel's office requesting assistance. She sent me to the archives in Morrow, Georgia. I found nothing. Then, trying to push further, I was instructed by the attorney of the corporation in writing not to contact my government any further regarding my concerns of our missing political party records. Every time you meet under these conditions, not disclosing this to the people of Georgia, it perpetuates harm upon us and makes us think you are part of the show. This is corporate theater and does not belong in the elections of Georgia at all. You are putting yourselves at risk. You are not immune for these acts outside the law of Georgia. Every time you sit in this room, you pretend. You have been given written notice, I know that. It is exhausting to keep track of the consequences of this fraud that your body and your bosses are conflicting upon the people of the great state of Georgia. The resistance of the corporation to comply with the law disqualifies every single one of our ballots under Georgia 21-2110 and 21-2154. Our ballots are totally spoiled again, thanks to the negligence and failure to perform your duties for the great citizens of Georgia. Complacency is acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we have David Summerall. On deck is Jamie Parrish.
All right. My name is David Summerall, an elector from Bibb County, Georgia. I request the Georgia State Board of Elections to give guidance to County Board of Elections on adjudicating voter challenges. Last week, I submitted 3 voter challenges to the Bibb County Board of Elections, totaling 791 voters. All 3 challenges were rejected by the Bibb County Board of Elections, citing a conflict with Federal Voting Rights Act's requirement that no changes be made to the voter rolls within 90 days of a federal election. Now, such interpretation makes voter challenges practically useless, since knowledge of a problem with a voter's registration would have to be known at least 3 months in advance, even though Georgia law allows voter challenges up to Election Day. This year, such voter challenges would not be admissible except for a couple weeks in late June due to the number of federal elections this year. Before rejecting the challenges, the Bibb County Board of Elections was questioning whether a residential address specifying where a voter actually lived was required for voter registration, even though I cited Georgia law and Judge Simpson's interpretation of the law in an April 3, 2018 State Election Board hearing, when he advised that post office boxes and commercial addresses were not acceptable addresses. Furthermore, they were questioning the evidence of voters who moved out of state and were registered out of state and even voting out of state. What evidence does the State Board of Elections consider valid for such challenges, and when can such challenges be brought? Please tell us. I've submitted a request for an investigation in the hope you will give us guidance. Also, I'd like to briefly express my concern about the discovery of how and where the master cryptographic encryption keys are stored in the Dominion system. As you're probably aware, Bibb released the database where they were discovered. I have some concerns about the potential for our elections, and so if you could please address that and give us guidance on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Next we have Jamie Parrish.
It seems
On
like
deck we have
people
Sarah
of
Thompson.
Fulton County are skeptical of.
Hello,
their
I'm Jamie Parrish,
election
Sandy Springs,
board.
Georgia. We Republicans like to throw out words like election integrity and party like it's candy. It's now the go-to political jargon that is our entree into, and if appropriate, our escape from any real meaningful conversations happening all over this state. I've been embarrassed by my own county party, the Fulton County Republican Party, for the last year, watching as witch hunts against people like me, whistleblowers. If you're lucky, they'll maybe return your phone call. It's become the norm. We may as well be smack in the middle of Maricopa County. But today we sit in front of the body in charge of our elections here in Georgia statewide. Not a single one of them, by Georgia law, have jurisdiction over any Republican lawmaker, organization, or voter in this state. Why, you ask? That's because there's not a real Republican Party here in Georgia, only a nonprofit corporation posing as a party. There are several flagrant violations of Chapter 21 election law happening, and the Georgia GOP itself is calling itself the party when it suits them and the corporation when it does not. I beg of you, before this state is embroiled yet again in another hot, stinking pile of elector shenanigans, please insist that the Georgia GOP is forced to rectify their filing to be compliant under Title 21, which starts off, bare minimum, by listing our state committee members on the filing of the Secretary of State, which to date it has not. The Georgia GOP doesn't even have members, and that is a violation of my state constitutional rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Next we have Sarah Thompson. On deck we have Joseph Rossi.
My name is Sarah Thompson. I'm from Bibb County. As members of the state election board, you have obtained your positions through state public officials who have gained their seats through so-called state political parties or the so-called state political parties themselves. You claim to desire to strictly follow our Georgia election laws. under our Georgia Constitution.
Where
Article
are
1
we
is our Bill of
as
Rights to
far as
protect us.
the-
Immediately
okay.
next is
Are you
Article
still
2,
able to hear
Section
it?
1,
Let me
which is
know.
why we're
It's
purported
sped
to
up
be here.
1.25.
Chief Justice Bethel of the Georgia Supreme Court has recently
1.5.
reminded Georgians and Kent
Right,
v.
so it's an
Williams, the
8-hour
absence
stream.
of statutory authority is
If you want
the
me to
absence
I can
of
throw
legal
it back down,
authority
'cause this
to
is getting
act.
kinda good.
You are in dire strait,
1.25
along with
right
our
now.
candidates, their fees, and our ballots.
So
You
I
have
don't
not
want
only
to
failed
be
to
here for
protect
8
us,
hours.
but
I can do a
actively
few
support a
hours, you
private
know, let's
Republican
take it
corporation
how-
in
let's
conducting
take it as far as we
state
can go.
election actions where there is no legal authority for the state to grant it. False allegations of state authority clearly egregiously hurt all citizens. We have told you, all the way from the state government to the AG's office 2 years ago, down to election officials and staff recently, just prior to qualifying. I rise with direct First Amendment and Article 1 grievances against your body and the Secretary of State. Your actions appear to be outside state and federal laws, including 52 USC. Our system of government is being actively subverted by this corporate scheme that used to be a political party prior to
any better?
2014.
I don't know how to adjust.
Here are the
Hold on,
documents
I may
for
be
this
able to adjust
corporation.
this.
As was mentioned, there are
Hello?
no members. We now are in our 10th
Check.
year with no members of a state political party lawfully operating in the state of Georgia. Please end the corporate election interference immediately. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that way we talk fast
Thank you,
even
Sarah.
without speeding
Next,
up.
we have Joseph Rossi. On deck, we have Tim Waters.
I got a little shaking hand problem, but I'll do my best here. All right. Good morning, Board. Thank you for your service, and good morning, other Georgia patriots. I've got just 2 quick points to make. First, I'd like to speak directly to the Board about SEB BI 2023-0001. As you may recall, this complaint was filed 3/21 of 22. Yes, believe it or not, almost 2 years ago. It requests an independent investigation of the Secretary of State's election division, and that's changed over time due to some constitutionality questions. But we're asking you to not investigate an elected official, rather to investigate the election office of the Secretary of State, none of whom are elected officials. That's important, and you guys know why you voted last time for some reasons relevant to that. Regarding this case, the complainants want to offer our support. It is critically important to the integrity of the upcoming November election. Per your request, the complainants will provide all factual data, full disclosure, including emails and transcripts that will 100% prove that that election office violated Georgia election code. Okay, number 2. Now I'd like to speak directly to those who have fought factually, respectfully, and relentlessly for the truth over the last 3 years. As of 4/10/24, I got another one of these certified letters from the State Election Board. Every time I get one of those letters, my wife sets it on my desk, and she says, "You got another one of those certified letters. I hope you're not being indicted this time." But anyways, as of that letter, it has now been factually proven that both the hand audit, this is really, really important, and the certified machine count, yes, the certified count, have both been found to be in violation of Georgia election law. Based on these findings, to those that have fought factually, respectfully, and relentlessly, I'll close with one word: vindicated.
Remember there was the alleged, the professionals, election professionals. Oh, this is the most secure election we've ever had.
Thank you,
They got
Joe.
right on
Next we have
camera the
Tim
next day,
Waters
and, like, it
and Jeff
was
Jolly
a
on
great
deck.
election.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, patriots. I wanted to follow on with Joe's line of thinking with this, and that is, there are 159 counties in Georgia, correct? There are 159 election offices. False. There are 160 election offices in Georgia. The 160th resides in the Secretary of State's office. And at the time of the 2020 election, Gabe Sterling was the chief election implementation manager for this 160th state election office. 159 election offices in Georgia are subject to investigation by the SEB, a la Nadine Williams from Fulton County or Deborah Presswood in Houston County. Any of them can be investigated by the State Election Board. Now it's time for the board to treat Gabe Sterling as an unelected official the same way these county officials are treated. If he and this 160 office violated election law, which we can prove they did, they need to be investigated. With their backs to the wall, Secretary of State's officer Sterling
What's
took to
insane is
Twitter and called millions of
taking
Georgia
Trump to
patriots
task
liars.
in Fulton County.
Mr. Sterling likes to hide behind his
That's still
tweets,
happening.
but when
That
challenged,
debacle.
will he have the courage to face the public?
Willis.
Will he accept an invitation to
What a
participate
mess.
in a respectful discussion? So far, he has not. He has hid, and his only method of reaching out to anyone is Twitter, where he said in late 2023, "We are dealing with the lies. Some spread them because they believe them, despite all the facts. Others spread them for one of three reasons: distraction, create division, and continue grifting for dollars." That's his accusations at us. We know the truth, folks. We know the truth. It's time to embrace the truth. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Tim. Next up, we have Jeff Jolly, and on deck, we have Bill Henderson.
No prepared remarks, just here to tell you, you can tell with this gray hair, I've been doing this for a while. I started working in elections when I was 20 years old in the state of Mississippi. I have worked in campaigns all over the Southeast and Midwest. I can tell you that paper ballots that are hand counted are the only fair elections that are possible. We have a governor who admitted at the Perry Fish Fry that any computer can be hacked. It's on video, you can see it. I suspect most of you in here have seen it. Cheating is always going to occur, but we've got to eliminate it where we can. Paper ballots is the quickest and easiest way to do it and the least expensive. Thank you.
Next up, we have Bill Henderson. On deck is Earl Ferguson. Good morning. I'm Bill Henderson from Doraville, and I come here with one simple question about our voter roll to address to the board, and I also address this to the people gathered here who have a wealth of knowledge about Georgia elections and Georgia laws. My question is this: how can there be entries, electors, registrations, or whatever you want to call them on the Georgia voter roll that have a date of last contact that's more than 10 years old? Okay, I'm a private citizen of this state, and I'm not a lawyer, but it seems very apparent to me that there are two Georgia laws, 21-2-234 and 21-2-235, and they were designed to keep the voter roll concise and accurate and prevent that from happening. I ask the board and the people in this room to correct my logic in this question if I'm wrong. Briefly, since I'm just given 2 minutes here. Georgia Law 21-2-234 mandates that the Secretary of State in odd number years compile a list of electors that have no contact for 5 calendar years and process them. If they do not respond to the process, they are moved to inactive status on the voter roll. Georgia Law 21-2-235 says that any elector in inactive status that has not voted or made contact for 2 general election cycles should be processed, and if no response is received, should be removed from the voter roll. Okay? By my research, which anyone who looks at the voter roll can easily do, it is apparent that 21-2-234 was not complied with in the year 2019. And subsequently, the inactive voters subject to that law in 2019 were given a 2-year grace for 21-235. The result of this is that right now, there are up to 80,000 and maybe up to 130,000 rows on the Georgia voter roll that should not be on it. They have had no date of last contact for the past 10 years. And many in this room can testify better than me. That presents a distinct vulnerability in the upcoming elections. There is a wealth of knowledge in this room about Georgia election law and our voter roll. I ask anyone to approach me and correct me in my analysis. But if I'm not corrected, I will ask the board and the Secretary of State to address this issue with haste. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Next up, we have Earl Ferguson. On deck, we have Kevin Muldowney.
It's those select few shady types.
Earl Ferguson, I'm a Fulton County resident, and I challenge voters in Fulton County. I'm convinced that we have a problem that is going to result in major voter fraud during the November election, and I want to tell you why. In 2020, I challenged a number of voters who had left Georgia and moved to North Carolina, registered to vote there. According to Georgia law, they are no longer eligible Georgia voters, and in 2020, the Fulton County Registration and Election Board approved my challenges, and those people were removed. In 2023, in December, I submitted a list of about 1,800 Fulton County voters who had moved to North Carolina and registered to vote there. My challenges were rejected by the board. There are 2 Democrats on the board who were on both of those events. I am convinced, and I have heard that there is the words being sent out by the Democratic Party not to remove people from the rolls. I believe that to be correct from my experience. If this is the case, we will probably be using the national voter register, the national change of address list as a directory of individuals who are less likely to vote in Georgia and are therefore targets for fraudulent voting. This is not the only challenge we will get, but it is one that I feel is very important. I have submitted a complaint to the State Election Board regarding what Fulton County has done, and I would encourage them to process that before the November election. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Kevin Muldowney, followed up by Matt Rowenzak.
Kevin Muldowney, Milton, Georgia. France banned mail-in voting in 1975 due to fraud. Mexico banned mail-in voting in 1992 due to fraud. Belgium banned mail-in voting in 2018 due to fraud. Sweden, Italy, Ukraine, Russia, and Japan do not permit mail-in voting.
Didn't know that.
No Middle Eastern country permits mail-in voting. No Latin country permits mail-in voting. Some of these countries may allow this in some extreme conditions, but for the most part, they realize how problematic no-excuse mail-in voting can be. There was a resolution put forth by this board to stop no-excuse mail-in voting, and Ed Lindsay cast the deciding vote defeating this resolution. Ed is a paid lobbyist for Cobb and DeKalb counties, as well as many other entities. I have an extensive list right here. Mr. Lindsay was on the payroll of the National Vote at Home Coalition previously. I'm quite sure they would not have looked favorably on good old Ed voting in favor of a resolution that would threaten absentee voting in our state. No doubt that would have impacted any chance of his getting back on that gravy train. Ed, dude, the time has come. You're a paid lobbyist. Your presence on this board is the very definition of a conflict of interest. Do us all a favor and resign today.
Next up, we have Matt Rowenzak.
Grab the hammer out of his hand. Is that Ed?
Next
Morning, Board. Matt Rowenzak. As we grow up, especially in our adult lives, we often have to take an ethics class, whether that be in school, in business, and in law, and in public service. One of the frequent issues that are brought up in these classes is the issue of potential conflicts of interest, especially when we're talking about boards and committees. When you take a government ethics course, they speak to this issue. They say one should avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. Mr. Lindsay, not only do you have an appearance of a conflict of interest, but you actually have a conflict of interest. You have multiple conflicts of interest.
Lindsay.
To do this, or because of this, you've had to recuse yourself from votes. There have been other instances where it relates to Cobb, DeKalb, or a statewide issue where you should have recused yourself, which means we do not have a fully functioning board member. We appreciate your service, but at this point, we need you to do the right thing, and that is to allow for someone to be seated into this position by someone who can fully function in this role and does not have multiple conflicts of interest. Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay. So it
Katie?
is the
Katie,
one.
good.
Can you hear me?
County.
I didn't know if you could hear me or
It
not.
looks
Thank you.
probably on the
Next
left.
on deck, we have
No,
Michael
he's
Gordon.
bolder.
And Katie, thank you for your
Mustache
I'm glad
maybe
you could hear
now.
me. That's good.
I don't know which one it is.
First, I'd like to make a request that
Is he
the
the one with his
SEB
hand on his
move to
head?
meeting once a month during this presidential year.
That's him right
In light
here.
of the recent revelations regarding Ed Lindsay's actions
That's
as a
Ed
member
Lindsay.
of Georgia's State Election Board, it is imperative that he resign from his position immediately. The evidence presented clearly shows that Lindsay has violated the board's own code of conduct by participating in and voting on cases involving counties for which he is a registered lobbyist. This blatant conflict of interest not only goes against the ethical standards expected of a public official, but also undermines the integrity of the electoral process in Georgia. Georgia law explicitly prohibits members of state boards from engaging in any business with the government that is inconsistent with their government duties. Yet, Lindsay has repeatedly failed to recuse himself from matters involving DeKalb and Cobb counties, despite being a registered lobbyist for these counties and a partner at a law and lobbying firm representing them. This represents a serious breach of trust and raises serious questions about Lindsay's ability to impartially fulfill his duties on the SEB. Additionally, Lindsay's connections to DeKalb County, which has been a major proponent of mail-in voting policies and accepted a significant grant from left-wing nonprofits, further call into question his objectivity and integrity as an SEB member. His failure to address concerns about election integrity issues in Georgia while representing clients involved in questionable electoral practices is deeply troubling and undermines public confidence in the electoral process. In conclusion, Ed Lindsay's actions as a member of the Georgia State Election Board represent a serious breach of trust and a failure to uphold the principles of impartiality and integrity that are essential to the functioning of our democracy. Therefore, I urge Lindsay to resign from his position immediately to restore public trust and ensure the integrity of future elections in Georgia. Anything less would be a disservice to the citizens of Georgia and a betrayal of the public trust.
Next up, we have Michael Gordon. On deck, we have George Balbona.
He's got his hand on his head.
Thank you.
Michael
Michael Gordon,
Fulton
Fulton County resident.
A few years ago.
Ed Lindsay is a paid lobbyist. The General Assembly has made their collective will known that they do not want paid lobbyists on the state election board. He must resign now, and if he does not, then he should be removed in compliance with the will of the people expressed through their representatives in the General Assembly. Furthermore, we do not have honest and secure elections today. What we do have is notoriously inaccurate voter rolls, no excuse absentee ballots, untrustworthy hackable machines. Just think of the DeKalb Democratic primary 2022. And we have ample evidence of ballot box stuffing. We need automated address validation during registration to clean up our voter rolls. We need ballot IDs to prevent ballot box stuffing. We need all ballots to be made public record so voters can verify the results. We need to hand count, hand mark paper ballots in the precinct on election day. Nothing less will restore confidence in our elections. Stop pretending we have honest and secure elections. Please fix this. Thank you.
Next up, we have George Balbona, and on deck, Casey Cunningham.
Myself here. Let's see if I can make myself disappear.
I'll be brief.
Boom.
The primary duty of the SEB is to promote uniformity. This seems impossible since the SEB and SOS have more turnovers than a pastry shop. Earlier this year, the SEB announced that they had voted to not allow complainants to speak on their own behalf during SEB case hearings. There is no documentation of this vote for such a drastic and unconstitutional change to the fundamental operations of the SEB. Now more than ever, the SEB relies upon the information gathered during SOS investigations. However, there are no standardized procedures for conducting SOS investigations, nor are there standardized training requirements for SOS investigators. Sirakoth claims that SOS is currently updating and changing standard operations. The SEB and the public should be hearing about this. According to the SOS, they do not maintain a database or spreadsheet of submitted complaints, SOS investigations, or SEB cases. Prior to the recent hiring of Alexander Harden, the SEB did not keep a complaint sheet, a spreadsheet either. In short, the SEB reinvents the wheel each time they hear a case against a Georgia county without any knowledge of previous rulings regarding similar cases and without any notice or notion about patterns of previous violations. Given the SOS and SEB's current MO of self-inflicted amnesia, I believe that the least that should be done is to create a public-facing database of SEB cases and outcomes, which would greatly alleviate the SOS from having to process so many open records requests. Lastly, the only constant at all SEB meetings are the binders, which all SEB members are provided and which are never retained or made available to the public. I think it would be a far better use of taxpayer money if these binders were retained as well as made available to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Next, we have Casey Cunningham. On deck, we have Marybelle Hodges.
Hi, my name is Casey Cunningham. I'm from Milton, Georgia. You know, I run a company, and we serve our customers. And when we don't serve our customers well, our companies go away. And today I'm asking you as a board to serve us, your customers, the constituents, well. And it begins with making a hard decision, but an easy one. Why is it easy? Because you want the integrity to not be questioned by what you do every day. But it's in question right now in multiple ways, as you just heard. So I'm representing the fact that Ed Lindsay needs to resign, and you need to force that resignation. And I'll give you 3 reasons why. The first one is Ed Lindsay's recent vote against halting no-excuse mail-in voting reeks of a blatant conflict. He serves as a paid lobbyist for numerous entities, and so how can we trust that his decision-making is impartial when his financial interests are so deeply entwined with those he purportedly represents? Ed Lindsay, your conflict undermines the foundation of our democracy, and it erodes the public trust in our institutions. You need to resign. Number two, the ties between Ed Lindsay and the National Vote at Home Coalition cannot be ignored. The organization advocates for absentee voting, directly benefiting from policies that Mr. Lindsay supports. It's abundantly clear that his allegiance lies not with us, the constituents you serve, but it lies with the special interests that line your pockets, sir. So that blatant favoritism has no place in our halls of governance. The third reason you need to resign, and the final one, this board, it is tarnishing you and your integrity and your credibility. How can we expect fair and unbiased decision-making when one of our own is beholden to outside influences? Your actions betray the trust of our community, and it's casting a shadow of doubt over the legitimacy of our proceedings. The time for action is now. Restore public trust. We cannot allow the corruption to continue and to loom over the board any longer, so I implore each and every one of you to join me in demanding Ed Lindsay's resignation. Let us send a clear message. Let you send a clear message that you will not tolerate self-serving interest any longer.
We have Mary Bell Hodges. Next is Richard Schroeder on deck. Thank you.
Good morning. Mary Bell Hodges, Gwinnett County. Georgia State Election Board and Secretary of State, please take notice that you may exercise due care. Please take notice that I, as one of the people, have assembled with other people in order for the consult about the common good and by necessity, demand that you give an open and public point of clarity as trustees and servants. Please take notice that the people have all political power, and all power that you have as trustees, servants, and agents of the people is delegated and granted through various constitutions as trusts. Georgia Constitution, Section 2, Paragraph 1, all government of right originates with the people, is founded upon their will only, and is instituted solely for the good of the whole. Public officers are the trustees and servants of the people and are at all times amenable to them. Please take notice that the people have a right to regulate their internal government and have the guaranteed right to investigate, scrutinize, and make certain not only that an election isn't stolen, but that it is administered in the manner prescribed by law. If an election wasn't conducted or administered lawfully and correctly, John Locke, in his 2 treatises for government, declares that the whole election is invalidated, and therefore no government is able to interfere with inherent rights and remedies. Please take notice that the people have a right to consult together for the common good, monitor and instruct public servants, and to receive assistance from others in America to better understand how to correct their servants, which must show that they have carried out elections in a way prescribed by the people through law. You have a duty, you have a sworn oath to the people, and I say, Lord, let justice run down like water and righteousness like a mighty river in Jesus' name.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we have Richard Schroeder. On deck, David Cross.
Richard Schroeder from Hall County. 2 minutes. I'm here today on behalf of my grandchildren. They deserve the same freedom and rights that were afforded me as I grew up in the United States of America. There's no justice in our nation. The Lord has given us dominion over everything in the first book of the Bible. These dominion voting machines have taken our dominion and stolen our votes for 2 decades. Our republic is in a serious downfall because of this. I have given the Haldeman report to you, the members of the board. I hope that you have read it and know that these dominion machines were designed and built to control elections. They are more insecure than the DRE system that they replaced. I have the code book here, where I find multiple infractions of the law that are being totally ignored. This makes our current system of voting totally unconstitutional. You are here to stand in the gap between 159 counties and the Secretary of State, who certified his own election. You have taken an oath to prevent fraud and deceit. We, the electors, have no transparent vote in the system that seals our paper-readable ballots and elects winners through a QR code that is unreadable and proprietary to Dominion. This is criminal. You need to vote today to unseal our paper ballots, count them, and if in fact there are discrepancies with the results of the 2020 and the 2022 elections, you must decertify these elections and do your job to restore our republic. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you today in great distress over our state of our nation. We are in the state of Georgia, have jeopardized the entire world through our corruption, injustice, and the dominion voting system. You gave us dominion over everything on earth in the first chapter of the Bible. Lord, we want our dominion back today. Lord, we pray for Dr. Jan Johnson, who has stood strong for what is right while serving on this board. Lord, we pray that you touch the hearts of the members of this board, sear their consciences as they vote on issues regarding the integrity of our elections. Lord, we pray for our new chairman. Give him the wisdom, discernment, and courage to make righteous decisions as he leads this board. Lord, return our dominion. We pray in the mighty name of Jesus. And I would like to have 10 minutes. I got more, but it is what it is.
Thank you, Richard. Next, we have David Cross. On deck, we have Marissa Pyle.
Be careful when you pray for wisdom. The Lord will give you problems to solve. My name is David Cross. I'm from Gwinnett County. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that I appreciate you being here today, everybody here. I also appreciate the service of our board members, truly. I know that it's an unpaid job. However, I was informed recently that one of my proposed rule changes to strengthen chain of custody for mail-in ballots did not arrive in time. I mailed all 3 letters for the 3 rules with a return receipt request on April 10th. 2 arrived on the 16th and 1 arrived on the 20th. It took 10 days for 1 letter to arrive by mail to show how mail ballots securely arrive from the same state. I could have crawled here faster from Suwanee, Georgia. Chain of custody is lost when ballots are mailed. To prove this, think about when on election day, when you go in to vote, you hand somebody your ID to prove who you are so that they then give you a ballot or they give you a ballot card. You then go vote. You then put your ballot into or deposit into a secure receptacle. Never once is it ever lost. I mean, you've always got eyeballs on you. And when we vote by mail, there is no guarantee that a ballot mailed is actually received by the person it's addressed to. When ballots are mailed, they're sent on an irregular size envelope with a logo on the outside advertising, "I'm a ballot." Okay? If a return receipt request document is mailed to this election board and it can't be received in less than 10 days, why should I believe that a first-class postage stamp is going to guarantee delivery of a ballot? We should be using Federal Express or UPS for guaranteed delivery, and they also have repercussions if they don't deliver it in time. Opponents will say that mailing ballots with secured delivery is just too expensive. If the state paid for mailed ballots in 2022 for the election and for the runoff, it would have cost about $6 million. Granted, that's not a trifling amount of money, but it is a rounding error in Georgia's $77 billion budget. The board has a duty not to the people who appointed you, but to the people of Georgia. I ask you, is $6 million too high a price for secure elections? Is this cost too high for the price of freedom? Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next up. Next up, we have Marissa Pyle. On deck, we have Lana Paz.
Hi, board members. My name is Marissa Pyle. I am the Senior Democracy Defense Manager at All Voting is Local Action, which is a nonpartisan organization that advocates for policies and legislative priorities that expand voter access, not limit it. I'm here today in opposition to proposed amendment of Recount Rule 183-1-15-.03, which focuses on hand counting for audits and recounts. As an observer, I've spent over 20 hours monitoring hand recounts in counties that have opted to perform them in recent elections. My experience, along with an overwhelming weight of expert evidence, makes it clear that hand recounts as a main tool for audits and recounts, either discretionary and mandated, as covered under this rule proposal, would make results more subject to confusion, less accurate, take longer, contribute directly to burnout from election officials and county offices, and open the door for elections subversion. The simple fact remains that humans, experts though we are in many things, are very bad at sequentially counting pieces of paper. Something anyone who has tried to count pages, dollar bills, or any other seemingly simple task can prove. A study from Rice University showed that with only 120 ballots, an exponentially lower total than any recount would contain, participants accurately counted the result of 2 races only 58% of the time. In the real world of elections in Mojave County, where Arizona's hand count test run to place a deck of 850 ballots with 36 races per ballot produced errors in 46 cases. In Spalding County, in the March 2024 presidential primary, with only 1 race on the ballot, it took poll workers 3 days to count only 6,700 ballots. The manpower, funding, time, and patience hand counting would require to conduct at such a large scale is not only daunting, but it would add also an impossible task to the plate of election officials, where they are already facing unprecedented scrutiny, potential staffing shortages, and increasingly contentious certification processes. It shouldn't be lost that in November, with state, local, and federal races on the ballot, we will see hundreds of ballot styles, which will be lengthy, along with higher turnout than the 8.8% seen by Spalding in the March primary. As Georgia heads towards a general election where we are again poised to be under the watchful eyes of the nation, this rule would delay results, inject uncertainty due to inevitable human error that could easily be exploited by bad or insincere actors, and result in not only state level but national ramifications. For the sake of democracy, I urge you to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Excuse me. Thank you. Next up, we have Lana Paz, and on deck we have Rachel Lastinger.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the State Election Board. My name is Lana Goitia Paz, and I am the Georgia Campaign Manager for All Voting is Local. I want to address the petition to amend Rule 183-1-2-.02 regarding election certification. While the proposed amendment's intent may appear commendable at first glance, I believe its implementation would introduce unnecessary complications and risks to elections in Georgia. First, the requirement for election officials to conduct a reasonable inquiry before certifying election results could significantly burden already stretched resources and staff. Our election officials work tirelessly to ensure fair and accurate elections within tight timelines. Introducing an additional layer of inquiry could slow down the certification process, leading to delays in finalizing election results and potentially undermining public confidence in the outcome. Worth noting is that the subjective nature of the reasonable inquiry standard opens the door to interpretation and inconsistency across jurisdictions. What one official deems as a thorough inquiry may differ from another's, leading to disparities in certification standards and creating confusion among voters and stakeholders. Additionally, the potential for disputes and legal challenges arising from disagreements over the sufficiency of the inquiry could further exacerbate tensions and undermine public trust in our elections process. We cannot afford to introduce uncertainty and contention into an already polarized political landscape and provide further cover for conspiracy theories to arise. In conclusion, while promoting transparency and confidence in our election process is admirable, the proposed amendment is not the appropriate means to achieve it. Instead, I urge the board to focus on supporting our election officials with the resources and guidance they need to carry out their duties effectively without imposing unnecessary hurdles. Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. Next, we have Rachel Lastinger. On deck, we have Ann Gray Herring.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to speak and to share my concerns with you. My name is Rachel Lastinger, and I'm the Associate Director of the Voter Access Project with the ACLU of Georgia. The Voter Access Project works to ensure voting is easy and accessible for all Georgians, and I'm here today to address several of the petitions to amend rules that will be the focus of tomorrow's agenda. While we are in opposition to each of the petitions, there are three that I want to specifically highlight. The petition to amend Rule 183-1-2-02, addressing the definition of certifying the results of a primary election or runoff, seeks to provide more clarity to the process, which is appreciated, but the proposed definition is far too vague. As the code stands, board members play an active role in our certification process by certifying that the results presented to them by the election supervisor represent a complete and accurate count of the ballots. The supervisor of elections and their teams are the ones directly overseeing the counting and tabulation process. If an election is voted to not be certified, there needs to be a very legitimate reason borne out by the evidence and based on specific reasons delineated by the legislator. When an election is not certified based on speculation, this sows fear and distrust in our democratic process. This increase in fear and mistrust also creates more harassment towards our election officials. The definition proposed in this petition includes after reasonable inquiry without a definition of that phrase. It is very vague what type of inquiry could be done and the time frame that inquiry has to happen within. This could give reason for speculation and rumors of incidences of election fraud to be used as cover to not certify important election results, giving legitimacy to these false claims. At a minimum, reasonable inquiry should be more specifically defined. The definition also requires certification to assess that all votes cast in that election were counted. This also needs to be more clear, as it could require all provisional ballots, for example, to be counted even if not cured. It also doesn't account for absentee votes and Yokava votes being counted on a different timeline than in-person votes. The petition to adopt new Rule 183-1-14-02 on the increased requirements for drop boxes and absentee ballots creates requirements above and beyond what is required by statute to use a drop box. The petition creates, in effect, a third check of ID when a voter chooses to submit their absentee ballot by an available method other than utilizing the USPS services. It would essentially create a new class of ballots to be treated as provisional ballots, as it is unclear who is making sure everyone that votes by drop box shows their ID first, when those ballots should just be counted as a regular absentee ballot under Georgia code. This rule change could easily disenfranchise absentee voters because of administrative error and creating unnecessary burdens on voters who need to cure their ballots by proving their identity for the third time in order to vote. The petition for amendment of recount Rule 183-1-15-03. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
That's all. My colleagues already spoke eloquently on the hand counts. So.
Thank you, Rachel. Next up, we have Ann Gray Herring. On deck, we have Tom Talbot.
Good morning. My name is Ann Gray Herring, and I'm the policy analyst for Common Cause Georgia. We're a nonpartisan grassroots organization with over 26,000 members across the state. As a nonpartisan organization, we care about the process, not the results. And what we have seen about the process in Georgia is that our elections are safe and secure, and
Let's be respectful to all of our speakers, or we'll cut off the public comment.
The biggest danger comes from unnecessary and sometimes unlawful interference with that process. We strongly caution against the proposed rules concerning the certification process. There's significant danger in disrupting and unnecessarily delaying it. We also want to speak to a couple of other areas that we think the State Elections Board could give further guidance on. One is voter challenges. These have become a significant issue in our state. We expect more in the lead up to November, and counties are handling them differently. There's ambiguity on the proper procedure and the proper threshold at two different levels. One for the challenge to receive a hearing, and then again, whether the challenge should be sustained. We think the State Elections Board could provide clarification on these, and another area of clarification is that a board cannot convert a challenge from a 229 to a 230 challenge, as we've seen in a number of counties. The onus is on the challenger to bring it under that area of the statute. Additionally, we think the SEB could provide guidance on SB 222 that passed in last year's legislative session. This is about the appropriation of funds for election offices. To properly prepare for the 2024 elections, officials in our counties need a clear understanding of what resources are available to them. As a specific example, federal government funds are specifically allowed as an acceptable funding source under this law, but the law also states that counties cannot solicit funds. So counties need to know what the process is to ensure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, next up we have Tom Talbot. On deck we have Sandra Berdart.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank the volunteers that serve on this board. It's a very, very responsible position. Having served on several nonprofits, I take that responsibility, and I hope you do with the gravity that is imposed upon you when you be selected to do this. I was unaware of the conflict of interest issue, but I would really have a problem in my own world being on a board if I had any conflict of interest. Let me get to the point. Last year I came and I testified and I made my point. I went to lunch with friends and I said, I asked the wrong question. Because when I asked the question, all I really received was smug looks from the board. And coming from the private sector, define a problem, fix the problem. My question to the board today is, you're familiar with the Haldeman report. You're familiar with the Rossi report. You're familiar with the issue with the voter rolls. How much evidence do you need to see before you do something? Your responsibility is representing the population of this state to do the very important job you are given, and that's oversight of our election system. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next we have Sandra Berdart. On deck, Jason Frazier.
Thank you. My name is Sandra Burkhart, and I am passionate about truth. When I witnessed the videotape of the State Farm Arena and watched my vote and the votes of many people who died be tarnished, it struck me to my core. And I pray that this board will have the courage to make a difference, because you have been placed in such a time as this to do something. I thank you and I pray for your courage. I want to thank you for volunteering. It's a very courageous thing you can do. You are watchdogs over the Georgia elections. Without fair and transparent elections, we all lose our freedom. On March 18th of this year, you, Ed Lindsay, recused yourself from voting on a major issue brought before the SEB by Marcy McCarthy, the chairman of the Republican Party. Why? Was it because you recognized that you could not be an effective member of the SEB because you are well paid by lobbyists with conflicting interests? I believe you even notified House Speaker Burns about recusing yourself from voting on that issue. While I appreciate you coming forward with that recusal, I believe that it is evidence that you need to resign and be replaced as soon as possible. Important elections are coming up, and people in Georgia need credible people in positions to protect our vote, not compromised ones. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. Okay, go ahead. You're on.
Yes, my name is Jason Frazier from Fulton County. I definitely wanted to echo what a lot of people have been saying. We need guidance. This board desperately needs to give counties guidance on how to properly maintain the voter rolls, how to properly adjudicate voter challenges, how to clean the voter rolls themselves, so that way myself and many others in here do not have to spend countless hours trying to find the tens of thousands of people registered multiple times within the state. And as many of you saw, whenever I testified at the State Ethics Committee a few months back, I showed evidence that in an afternoon I found 30-some thousand people that lived in Georgia, filed a change of address to either Florida or North Carolina, and are then registered at their new address. These people have done nothing wrong. However, Georgia failed to take them off the voter rolls in Georgia. They should not be registered in 2 states. As you heard Mr. Ferguson say, he turned in several people in Fulton County who moved out of Fulton County. Great, people move all the time. They now live in North Carolina. Fulton County refused to take them off the voter rolls. They said, well, you know what? They've lost their residency, but not their registration. I view that as a problem. I mean, last time I checked, I need residency to have a registration in this state. And furthermore, I did more analysis on many of those, and I did find people that were given credit for voting in both Georgia and Florida. This is what you're enabling. This is what Fulton County's enabling. We need this cleaned up. We talk about investigating the Secretary of State's office. It needs investigated because if I can find in an afternoon 30-some thousand people registered in 2 states, the Secretary of State's office damn well ought to be able to figure that out too. We've got a problem. I am unpaid. Secretary of State's office is paid. They have employees. They need to be cleaning these voter rolls, and I only looked at 2 states at that point in time. There are a lot of other states. People move everywhere. And we have to pay for voter rolls in Georgia, whereas Florida and North Carolina, Ohio, and many other states have free voter rolls, which allow this to happen. But long and short of it is I shouldn't be doing this. The state needs to. I expect your help in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. All right. Next up, we have Alicia Frazier, and on deck we have Garland Favorito.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, board. Like everybody else said, Mr. Lindsay, really appreciate your service, but the votes, as I've seen in the last couple years that you've made, are not aligned with our conservative values. Another note, open records requests, voter rolls, the prices are going up. That's an issue. In other states, they're free. That's something I think you guys need to take up and help drive down whatever's doing that. And the voter rolls are full of errors anyway, just like you just heard, so what are we paying for? And finally, I feel like the biggest theme that's been going on for, I guess, 4 years now, in people of positions of power, it's stonewalling. And that's all that's been going on. You have Mr. Rossi's case, who's been ongoing for the last few years. I've come in here and listened to some of the meetings, and you've spent hours discussing minute details, like was someone standing 149 feet or 150 feet from a pole? You strain a gnat, yet you swallow the camel. We are poll workers, many of us in here. We're data analysts. We've shown you indisputable data, so it's easy to see when you close your eyes. If someone is pulling your strings, resign and let someone else try. Both parties have corruption. We simply need people who can make good choices independently. And in response to some of the ladies about the rules tomorrow, I will say, any errors in hand counting is minuscule compared to a black box computer that's manipulated and our paper ballots are hidden. The work to hand count is minuscule when our republic is at stake, and the money to hand count is minuscule compared to the cost of the machines and maintenance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up, we have Garland Favorito, on deck with Bob Coonert. Bob, it looks like C-O-O-V-E-R-T.
Coonert, Bob Coonert.
Coon? Okay, Coonert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm the co-founder of Voter GI. I've written 2 letters to you about SEB 2022-348, the complaint that explains how Georgia's voting system has a QR code counting error that caused the Tennessee Secretary of State to stop using the same system we use here. At the December 19th SEB meeting, the complaint was postponed because Deputy Director Michael Barnes was unavailable to answer questions about it. At the January Curling v. Raffensperger trial, Mr. Barnes admitted under oath that he is by no means an expert in voting system applications, cybersecurity, malware, or how malware can defeat logic and accuracy testing. In my February 11th letter to you, I tried to alert you that Mr. Barnes' sworn testimony proves he would not be qualified to answer questions about this complaint. At the February 13th SEB meeting, I planned to alert you again before the case was heard, but the former chair had removed all public comments from the agenda. At that meeting, Mr. Barnes answered questions about the complaint anyway, and the board voted 3-1 to dismiss it without hearing from the complainants. It's clear to us who saw that Mr. Barnes had not read the complaint, did not understand its contents, had not spoken with the complainants, and did not perform an investigation. He did not know that the complaint showed audit logs had 65 of 67 counties surveyed, had that error. He didn't do a root cause to find the problem, didn't perform a system evaluation. He was not aware that thousands of errors were found in Gwinnett, Floyd, and DeKalb, the county where the system declared the wrong winners. Dr. Johnson had to explain to Mr. Barnes that the QR code error causes the system to accept a ballot and not count it, and that is undetectable with our current reconciliation procedures. So therefore, because of the importance of this complaint, I ask you to reopen this case, conduct a legitimate investigation with your own investigator, and hear from the complainants, just as the board used to do before the former chair eliminated complainant testimony to suppress the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Darwin. Next up is Bob Convert, and on deck is Paul Hershey. Paul Hershey.
Good morning, board. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your efforts. There's a lot of themes going around this room today, and one of them is the investigation of the Secretary of State's office. Now, I would encourage each of you, if you haven't read the closing arguments from the Curling v. Raffensperger case, it helps you understand why these themes exist. I'd like to shed light on one. I was recently having a discussion with somebody in Gilmer County, an election official, and the courthouse was recently hacked there about a month ago. The election office hacked. Fulton County hacked, shut down for days, sometimes some departments weeks. But we don't have any cybersecurity issues with our election systems, right? So, in the closing arguments, who was actually responsible for cybersecurity? They asked Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling said, it's a critical component of securing our election systems. Mr. Barnes says it's not him, he's not responsible. Mr. Sterling said it's not him, he's not responsible. Mr. Barnes has no responsibility at all, which is quite odd since he is a person, the guy who is responsible for the machines and the administration of the system. It must be Merritt Beaver, the CIO, right? He would be the person in charge. Well, under testimony, he said, no, I'm not in charge. I've outsourced it all to Dominion. This is under testimony in front of Judge Totenberg. Look it up. It's in the closing arguments. He says he would not have been involved in the security of the Dominion system, so Mr. Barnes was also wrong about that. Mr. Hamilton also said, as the CISO of the Secretary of State's office, that he handed it over to the Dominion company. However, Dominion disagrees with that. Mr. Sterling also said it is Dominion, but then he said, well, it's also the responsibility of the county, suggesting the state itself has no responsible for cybersecurity of our election systems. The counties I've talked to don't agree with that. But Blake Evans, who is the state election director, says, no, it's not really Dominion, because when Dominion recommends that we do things and we disagree, we just make our own decision. Now, here's the important piece of all of this. In testimony, all of these leaders of the Secretary of State's office stated that they have not identified one person in the Secretary of State's office with any cybersecurity training, any computer science background, who was involved in any decision on how the system gets used. So, board, I ask you, how can you do your job when the Secretary of State's office nefariously does theirs? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next up, we have Paul Hershey on deck. On deck, we have Ginger Hermans.
Thank you, board members, for your service, and I appreciate everyone here today. I just have some brief points because everything I wanted to say has probably already been said before, but profiting from any decision by any state election board member is at the very minimum unethical. No excuse absentee ballot voting has been proven to be rife with fraud and abuse. Early voting causes chain of custody issues that cannot be resolved. And the state of Georgia needs to move to election day voting with hand-counted paper ballots.
Thank you, Paul. Next up, we have Ginger Hermans.
The word is maladministration. I was minding my own business
working to pay the bills, going to church, raising my family, paying taxes, you know, just living. I had no interest in politics. I always took an effort in vetting my choices and always voted. For 4 decades, that's about all I did. Shame on me. I trusted that my representatives that we placed in office would represent us. Then 2020 happened. The fraudulent election in Georgia, in our state, not Michigan, not Ohio, but Georgia. I have lived in Georgia for over 40 years. I know my state. I started reading, listening, talking about what happened. Then I read a document and summary from the testimony from then Senator William Ligon, which presented. On the bottom of page 12, it says, and I paraphrase, the 2020 election was so fraught with systematic irregularities and voter fraud that it should not be certified. So I thought surely the governor would intercede to get this crap straight, right? But he didn't. I thought surely Senator Loeffler wouldn't certify, but she did. Surely mostly the GOP legislators would hold a special session and come to rescue, but they didn't. Surely the Georgia courts would intervene and straighten things out, but they didn't. So surely the State Board of Elections here would hear our evidence and take action. But no, you haven't. Most would say, even our own party have said, oh, we must move forward. But we can't, and we will not let this slide. This is the moment, it is the most pressing issue in our state and our country, and therefore the world. If we change from the untrusted BMDs and QR code system to a secure grade, hand-marked paper ballot system like Florida, Alabama, Idaho, Montana, the ones they're using, you'd see people begin to trust our system again. But no, here we are, 4 years later, to trust this system, and we are stuck with this crap. So I will end with this. Here's the word, maladministration again. And there are consequences for this failure to act. And that is what you're doing. Thank you.
At the beginning of the meeting, the chair announced that there would be 1 hour of public comment and 30 people be allowed to speak. However, 44 have signed up to speak today, which should not have happened. But without dissent, the chair will allow the additional speakers to have 2 minutes each. Hearing no dissent, the chair would entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess.
Thank you.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? So moved. We'll recess for 5 minutes, then we'll continue public comment for the last 14 speakers.
Yes, there we go. Oh, it's still on.
I concur. Hey, we'll do like jump on with papers up there and leave.
All right.
Thank you. That was a little bit longer than 5 minutes. We seem to be going over more day. We do have 14 more speakers. The board has been very generous in allowing some people to go over the time. I ask you to please keep it to 2 minutes. And when you hear the first light tap, that means your time is up. So please wrap it up pretty quickly after that. And if we keep down the clapping and standing and all that stuff, it'll help get us back on track a little bit too, please.
Okay. All right. So next we have Field Searcy on deck, and then we've got Sam Carnline in the hole on deck. So appreciate you guys.
Good morning. My name is Field Searcy. I'm from Grady County. I'm with Georgians for Truth. We've been before this board several times about a solution for our unsecure election system, and we're going to repeat it again today. The Georgia law provides in 21-2-334 that our county supervisors can, for any reason, go to hand-marked paper ballots. And we have the hand-marked paper ballots already. It's called the absentee provisional emergency ballot. It's the same ballot. It's just procedures handled, the chain of custody is handled differently. But we can go to hand-marked paper ballots today. We can scan them on the current scanners and get results that night, but we can also do a hand count before we certify these elections so we can have confidence and trust back in our elections. We often complain about Washington, D.C. as the swamp. We have a swamp right here in Atlanta, Georgia. It starts with our election system, our Secretary of State's office. It needs to be investigated. We have members of this board that need to resign for conflict of interest. We've got lots of problems, but folks, you can make a difference here. You can clarify the rule for these counties. You can say, you can go to hand-marked paper ballots. It's in the rules. Let them do it. Give us the freedom. And we also have corruption here in this Fulton County. The counties are not being held accountable to the election laws. That needs to stop. Let's drain the swamp. Thank you.
Thank you, Field. Next up, we have Sam Carnline and then Russell Carlisle on deck. Sam.
Thank you. My name is Sam Carnline. I'm from Grady County. We grow cotton, peanuts, and pine trees in Grady County, and you can make a lot of paper ballots out of the pine trees in Grady County. 21-2-300 states that the elector will be able to read their ballot. What we have is a spoil ballot because it's gone into a QR code. In 2024, we will be voting still where the tabulator counts the QR code. I cannot tell if I voted for Mickey Mouse where it says Mickey Mouse is in my QR code or not. And how can any election superintendent in any county certify an election to where they can't tell if it says Mickey Mouse in the QR code either? Now, our legislators have let us down. Our judicial system has let us down. Our executive branch has let us down. And the Secretary of State never picked us up. Now, if it's all right for the former president of the United States to be raked over the coals and be investigated, then why is it not all right to have the Secretary of State's office in the state of Georgia investigated? He can certify his own election. That needs to be addressed. Now, here it is. It's one word. It's called trust. 62% of Georgians, according to a Rasmussen poll, do not trust the election system in the state of Georgia. As my friend Phil Hersey just said, in 21-2-334, it states that if it's impracticable to vote on the machines, and by golly, if Eric Holderman and that crowd hadn't shown us that it's impracticable to vote on these machines, then I don't know what impractical means. We need to go to the hand-marked paper ballot, counted on election day at the precinct, to bring trust back to the Georgia voter, because frankly, folks, there's no way to clean the swamp. And our republic is a farce if we don't have the representative form of government that our forefathers designed for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Next up. Thank you. Next up, we have we have Russell Carlisle's up, and then we have Nancy Saunders on deck. I'm sorry? Oh, you signed up twice. Sneaky devil you are.
That'll make it 2 minutes shorter.
Yes, thank you. All right, next up is Nancy Saunders. Nancy, all right, please come up. And then on deck, we have Gary Coates, please. Thank y'all.
Nancy Saunders, Fulton County, and first of all, I thank you all for the work that you do here. And I'm also sorry that I'm here, because I've known Ed Lindsay for a long, long time. And as a member of the State Board of Elections, you're required to avoid any appearance of conflict or impropriety, and we all know that. Unfortunately, Ed, you voted on cases that involved counties where you were also a hired lobbyist, and that certainly appears to be a conflict of interest. I've read the arguments, but it's impossible to come away with anything but that. That's resulted in a breach not only of the SEB Code of Conduct, but really more importantly, and you've heard it, it's a breach of trust of the very voters you were appointed to serve. And can I do that? Georgia voters must trust that we have free and fair elections. We must. And Ed, you've broken that trust, and for that reason, I respectfully ask you to step down. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Next up, we have Gary Coates, and on deck, we have Allison Rosebecker.
Good morning. Thank you. These are going to be really brief because most of what I wanted to say has already been said, and I don't want to repeat myself or them. First, I'd like to address, there was a young lady up here that spoke. The lobbyist. Process is not more important than results. Okay? So I don't know what school you went to, but maybe you ought to go demand a refund. Okay? I would just like to say that, this board and our legislators have effectively stonewalled us. They've run the clock out. There has been absolutely nothing meaningful done at all in 3 years. Our voter rolls are still not cleaned up. The QR codes are still on the ballot, and they're illegal. The software has still not been updated. By the way, that would have cured the QR code problem. Not that I endorse Dominion, but at a minimum, that software had to be updated. Now we're being told that this will all happen in 2025. Wow. I don't know, I find that kind of interesting. And I don't think you need to put 2 and 2 together to figure that out. It's a disgrace. We want our state back. It's criminal what is happening in this state. And I came down here from a pretty darn corrupt state. They can't hold a candle to you. When I came down here, I didn't want to get involved in this stuff anymore. But here I am. I'm retired. My wife is at home on St. Simon's Island. This has got to end. Got to end.
Thank you, Gary. Next up, we have Allison Rosebecker, and then on deck, we have Derek Blassingame.
Hi, I have worked for the last 3 years for some of the nation's top election integrity experts. And you know what? I can tell you from a national perspective, your state is one of the most egregious I've seen. I have heard incident after incident after incident of things that shouldn't be happening in any state. They do happen in all the states, but they're happening way too much in this state. You want to know why 2/3 of the country didn't trust the results of the 2020 election? Right here, Georgia. I mean, you've got a small county like Floyd County. They had under 3,000 votes not counted. Oh, but you want to tell us that, that wouldn't have affected the presidential election. It did. It also affected the down ballot races. How many people should be serving, regular people, we the people serving, and they're not because of fraudulent elections? And you want to know what? People in Georgia, they don't know if their votes even count anymore. Do they count? If they are counted, are they going to be canceled out by a dead voter or duplicate ballot counts or anything else? And you know what? I was a lifelong Republican, but you know what? The Democrats and the Republicans, they're the same. The Democrats at least tell you what they're going to do to you. The Republicans say, we're for election integrity, we're your friend, and they stab you in the back. Now, you want to know what? I do have hope today. The people, we the people, as the Founding Fathers intended, are going to take back our elections, and we're going to take back our government. And you know what? We're not going to be beholden to career bureaucrats like Ed Lindsay, and we're not going to be beholden to career politicians like Raffensperger and Brian Kemp. Mr. Lindsay, please resign, and everybody, we need to vote Amish. Get rid of the machines. They're the big problem. And you know what? God will win in the end, and we will win. You people are the refounding fathers.
Thank you, Allison. Next up, we have Derek Wassingame, and on deck is Ginger Bradshaw.
She left.
I'm sorry. Okay. And is Derek Wassingame here? He left. Okay. So, how about Ginger Bradshaw? You're here. Okay, you're up. Okay. And on deck after Ginger, we've got. Is it Kirk Humphrey? That's hard to read. Thank you.
Hey, my name's Ginger Bradshaw. I live in Sandy Springs. And first of all, I want to say to y'all, and I want to say to everybody, we are in favor of every legal vote to count. We're not here to try to disenfranchise anyone. We want the homeless to count if they want to vote. We want every legal person to count. But we don't want 15 people in a house that's boarded up that's vacant to count. We don't want people registered to post office boxes to count. But that's just my overall thing. But I want to thank all of you for serving. I know it's a lot of work. I see some of you at lots of different meetings to learn and to see what's going on. But as you know, our elections are a mess. I don't think there's anybody in here that could say that they aren't. So, in the way I look at it, we need to clean our voter rolls, we need to go to paper ballots, and we need to have an ethical state board of election. And the first step is easy. And Mr. Lindsay, I don't like, this isn't mean-spirited, but just please resign. And then you can go play golf, go do whatever it is you want to do, because of your conflicts of interest. And I don't blame you for giving up a lucrative job to do this non-paying job. You just can't do both. And so as of now, we do not live in a banana republic, but we're very close. If we don't have our elected and appointed officials, I mean, because this is a huge, gargantuan mess. It's not like we've got this little problem over here, we can kind of clean it up and everything will be wonderful. But like I said, the first thing we can do is have an, okay. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ginger. Next up, we have Kirk Humphrey. Is it Humphrey? Anybody? Is it Kirk? He doesn't want to speak? Okay, thank you. Yes. Oh, okay, no problem. All right, next up, we have Gail Lee, and on deck, we have Joan Webb.
Hi, I'm Gail Lee. The notice letter the State Election Board sent Mr. Mankala was posted on social media. That letter states he will not be given an opportunity to speak to the case or refute statements made by investigators. This, I realize, is standard, but although questionable, SEB policy. But you're not dealing here with a felon voting or a person registering to vote using a non-residential address. You're dealing with the viability of the state's election, and it has consequences for our entire nation. To only consider the facts presented by investigators employed by the Secretary of State, who bears responsibility for elections and who has a vested interest in an exonerating judgment, would be an obvious stacking of the deck in the politician's favor. Therefore, as a citizen who is concerned that my civil rights may have been violated by election systems and/or personnel, I strongly recommend the plaintiff or complainant be granted a fair hearing, be allowed to speak, and if necessary, refute or supplement investigator findings. We the people want the truth, and we do not trust processes that suppress our voices. And thank you for extending the time.
Thank you, Gail. Next up, we have Joan Webb. On deck, we have Pamela Reardon.
This is basically a Me Too speech. I've met Ed Lindsay. I like him as a person, and then I found out that he works for DeKalb County as a consultant as well as Cobb County. And it's difficult for anyone to serve two bosses, two supervisors. And on those instances when recusal has been done, it has hindered the board in making a decision as far as 2 against 2 and in making any important decisions. So I do reiterate what others have asked. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. Excuse me, Joan. Okay, next up is Pam Reardon. On deck is, and last but not least, is Amanda Pettyman.
All right, thank you very much. I'm Pam Reardon. I'm actually a candidate, so it's important that, to me, it's been important all my whole life, that we have fair and proper elections and only legal votes count. I am desperately afraid that illegals are going to be allowed to vote. I have talked to the Secretary of State's office to their face. Oh yeah, we're good. You know, we get the information from the DDS. I have gone to the DDS and tried to do an open records request. It's impossible. It's impossible to find out if they're registering illegals. The other, I'm legal. I'm from Canada, but I'm legal. Okay, so I know I went through the process. So this is a real sore point with me when people who are not legal vote. So I have found out some information that all those apartment buildings, a lot in Johns Creek that have been built, 30% of those are being bought by NGOs. And the people you see illegally coming into our country, and the UN and the NGOs are providing their airfare, they're living in those. And they are getting work permits, and they are going to vote. So sure as I'm standing up here, they're going to vote. Now, let me just say on Ed Lindsay, the code is 21-5-74. Do I have to read the code? I have the code. You must resign. The last thing is, I want to say, I have a real good solution to the voter roll problem. Let's delete the whole voter roll, and everybody sign up with your legal address and your legal ID to vote this time. So let's do that. We can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pamela. All right, next up we have Amanda Pettyman.
Good morning. My name's Amanda Prettyman. I'm in Bibb County. And I want to make 2 points and then read Federalist 53. One point is with 62% of voters not trusting our elections, you could argue that our government is engaged in voter suppression by not addressing our concerns. Number 2, the encryption keys discovered from my county and others with the databases released suggest that perhaps every county is this way, and it tells me that we're in a state of emergency. You have the complaint before you, I believe it's been submitted, and it shows that they are in plain text, unprotected, and gives access to all tools and information to manipulate, fabricate, produce, replace election results. And so I think Georgia is in a state of emergency. Our code already provides a solution for that. As Field said, hand-marked emergency paper ballots scanned in our machines and then hand-counted with proper chain of custody. And so now I'll go to Federalist 53. And that was written by James Madison. I'm just going to read a portion of it, February 1788. It is an inconvenience mingled with the advantages of our frequent elections, even in single states, where they are large and hold but one legislative session in a year, that spurious elections cannot be investigated and annulled in time for the decision to have its due effect. If a return can be obtained no matter by what unlawful means, the irregular member who takes his seat of course is sure of holding it a sufficient time to answer his purposes. Hence, a very pernicious encouragement is given to the use of unlawful means for obtaining irregular returns. Were elections for the federal legislature to be annual, this practice might become a very serious abuse, particularly in the more distant states. Each house is, as it necessarily must be, the judge of the election's qualifications and returns of its members, and whatever improvements may be suggested by experience for simplifying and accelerating the process in disputed cases, so great a portion of a year would unavoidably elapse before an illegitimate member could be dispossessed of his seat, that the prospect of such an event would be little check to unfair and illicit means of obtaining a seat. All these considerations taken together warn us in affirming that biennial elections will be useful to the affairs of the public, as we have seen that they will be safe to the liberty of the people. And so, as you can see, to our founders, it was presumptive that election irregularities, be it error or fraud, would be investigated and acted upon quickly, and that has not happened here. So I urge you to consider it as you would if you went to the emergency room with chest pain, because this is one of the most fundamental rights, and it deserves the seriousness and expediency that you would be given there. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate every one of your comments, and thank you for being here and participating, and I'm going to turn it back over to the chairman. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment section of the agenda. We'll move into investigative reports. And the first section on investigative reports is cases recommended to be dismissed. We will vote on these in mass, with the exception of those reports to be discussed by individual board members if they want to remove some of them. Member Guzal. Yeah.
SEB case 2021-054, tab number 4, please.
Are there any other cases to be discussed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull SEB 2022-038, Gwinnett County case. That's number 5 on your tab.
Any other cases that the board would like to discuss in that first section? And we will pull SEB 2021-058 and SEB 2022-038 for further discussion. The remaining cases recommended to be dismissed are, let me go through these, SEB 2021-048 Sumter County, failure to open poll, SEB 2022-129 Muskogee County, problems at the polling place, SEB 2022-182 Long County, absentee ballot issue, SEB 2022-194, Fulton County, Alpharetta Branch Library, ABA, SEB 2022-204, Forsyth County, residency issue, SEB 2022-253, Fulton County, early closing of advanced polling location, SEB 2022-275, Fulton County, improper campaign sign postings, SEB 2022-368, Fulton County, prohibited personnel practices by poll officials, SEB 2023-002, Morgan County, failure to open polls, SEB 2023-010, Gwinnett County, ineligible board member, SEB 2023-047, Fulton County, City of Milton, improper polling location changes, SEB 2023-093, Fulton County, City of Roswell, Johns Creek Water Treatment Plant, delayed poll opening. All of those cases have been recommended for dismissal by the investigators. The board has had their briefing book for about a week now and has had an opportunity to look at those cases. Do we have a motion on those cases?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
And your motion is
to
dismiss the cases
yes.
previously listed. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, since he's here, I would move to amend my motion to hear separately 2023-10.
We have a motion by, an intervening motion by Board Member Lindsay to remove, so SEB 2023-010, which will be removed. The remaining,
I would move that the remaining cases that you cited, that you listed, be dismissed, Mr. Chairman. with that change that up. from
There
our
is a
previous
motion to remove the remaining cases that have been listed. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of moving the cases previously listed, with the exception of the three, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, so moved.
Sure.
The board will now hear from the investigators on SEB 2021-058, multi-county excess voting.
Okay. Following the November 2020 presidential general election, several states received complaints alleging cross-state double voter fraud. The Georgia Secretary of State initiated an investigation into voter fraud following this complaint. The Georgia Secretary of State's office initiated this investigation after 60 Georgia voters were identified by name and date of birth as voting in the Georgia and another state for the same November 2020 general election, which is a potential violation of OCGA 21-2-572 that prohibits repeat voting in the same primary or election. On February 8th, 2021, we received a spreadsheet containing 60 names. According to the voter registration system, ElectionNet, also known as eNet, 19 of the 60 people potentially voted in Georgia. The investigator inspected the documentation and noticed that 18 of the 19 alleged double voters had already been investigated under case number SEB 2021-138. One of the individuals, Nathaniel Brown, was not investigated. Further investigation into Mr. Brown's situation revealed that he voted absentee by mail for the Georgia 2020 general election on September 25th, 2020. Richmond County was able to locate the oath envelope for Brown. It is indicative that Brown did not vote. They could not locate it. So it's indicative that Brown did not vote, and a clerical error was most likely made, giving this voter credit. During the investigation, Richmond County received vital records information on August 14, 2023, confirming that Brown is now deceased. The South Carolina Election Commission confirmed there was a match and that Brown voted early in person on October 28, 2020 in Lee County, South Carolina for the November 2020 general election. The allegation that Georgia voters voted more than once in the same election was unsubstantiated. The spreadsheet initially identified 60 alleged double voters in Georgia and another state by name and date of birth only. Following the Georgia Secretary of State's data match request using name, date of birth, and adding the social security number, that number was reduced down to the 19 that I talked about earlier. And ultimately, Mr. Brown was identified as having not been previously investigated. And based on that, this case is unsubstantiated.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight a couple of points. So based on publicly identifiable information on public databases, there were 60 potential matches. Is that correct?
Yes,
But
correct.
then using data that's only available to government databases, because these are unique identifiers, and this is non-public information. So 2/3 of the potential matches were eliminated. Is that correct?
Yes, just about, yes, from
So
60 down to
I
19.
wanted to make that point, that the data that's available to the public is really incomplete. And when 2/3 of those were false matches, we're looking at a very dangerous practice if we're trying to use solely public databases to identify individuals, and that's why I wanted this case brought up. It's when the private, unique identifiers are matched, that is when we have a high level of confidence that we have matching voters, not using public databases. Thank you. I have no further questions on this.
I want to clarify that 18 of the 19 have previously been disposed of, correctly? The 18 of the 19 voters have previously been heard or disposed?
Yeah, they're in other cases,
Right.
some different cases, and they have not been heard.
They
So
have
those
not
are,
been
those
heard.
are upcoming, yes.
Okay, right.
Yep.
So I would move to dismiss this complaint with the rest of them.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question. Michael? Mr. Chairman, a question for the investigator. I see that the absentee by mail application was found, but the oath envelope for Mr. Brown was not located. Did the investigator go further and look at the absentee voter list, like the numbered voter list that is provided with absentee voters?
We have a problem there. Okay.
So not finding an absentee ballot oath envelope is just not finding something, but was it confirmed that this voter's name was not on the absentee voter list?
I'd have to take a look at the,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would also like to say that having the tools available in election offices that are much more detailed and accurate than what may be available to the public should be further encouragement that election offices will utilize that data, to maintain accurate rolls. And I don't understand why challenges continue to be made with voters that have allegedly moved to other states and registered to vote in other states or actually voted in other states, and our election offices are unable to corroborate that information. Thank you.
No, I don't see it.
Yeah.
Can I also just add a point of clarity? Mr. Brown passed away, correct?
Yes, he did.
Okay, so
After
he cannot be a respondent.
Any other questions from the board?
No further questions. I move that we dismiss.
Do we have a motion on this case?
I'll renew my motion to dismiss.
We have a motion
Second.
to dismiss and a second to dismiss this case. Any discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of dismissing case SEB 2021058, multi-county excess voting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, so moved. Unanimous. Next case is SEB 2022-038, Gwinnett County ballot harvesting. Member Lindsay, hold that case.
Yeah. In particular, I'd like to ask you about one particular individual who refused to cooperate, and that would have been Joyce Lynn Lofton. And let me ask you this, is Ms. Lofton here by chance? Okay. Here's the reason that I want, and I'll ask you to confirm it with this, is that, you know, when you the investigators approached Ms. Lofton, she basically refused to cooperate, and she hired an attorney who said that she would not cooperate, correct?
Yes.
And that the film did show that she dropped off 3 ballots. You checked to determine whether or not there were any other residents living in her household who registered to vote, and there were none, correct?
At that time, that's true, but it doesn't go back to 2020. When it was checked, it was 2022, so that information was, there was no other registered voters in 2022.
Okay. My concern is that, you know, there may very well been a very legitimate reason why Ms. Lofton dropped off the ballots. She may have been doing so for an elderly person or someone else that she had charge over, someone else living in her household. But her refusal to cooperate doesn't tell us one way or the other. And I'm not prepared to dismiss a case because someone refuses to cooperate. But you know, she was not given a notice that we would be taking up her case for the possible adjudication as to a penalty. So for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I would move as to Joyce Lynn Lofton that we continue this matter to our next hearing to give Ms. Lofton an opportunity, and her attorney, since she's hired one, give her a chance to use him or her. And let's see what the facts are in that case, whether or not some type of misconduct took place. For that reason, I would move to continue that particular matter as to Ms. Lofton.
We have a motion from Member Lindsay to continue case SEB 2022-038. Do we have a second?
No, as to Ms. Lofton only.
As to Ms. Lofton only.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a discussion. We have a motion and a second to continue SEB 2022-038 as it pertains to Ms. Lofton only. Is there any discussion?
I would agree with the motion to continue and ask Ms. Lofton to appear, but I also would like to make a motion to continue another of these cases.
Yeah, like I said, I just wanted to start there, and we can take up any other ones then.
We have a motion and a second to continue SEB 2022-038. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, so moved by a vote of 3-0. The next case that was polled was SEB 2023-0.
Mr. Chairman, I think Dr. Johnson wanted to address one other matter within that.
Right. So I am interested, more interested in number 4 of this case, the video showing a woman, a female, dropping off multiple ballots, and the video, review of the video shows maybe 15 or 20 ballots, and the person in the video appears to be an election worker.
Are you referring to the same case?
Same case.
Yep.
The investigative report says they could not identify the woman. Looking at the video, I could, minus the mask right here, she seems to be easily identifiable by somebody if she's an election worker and has worked in an election office. So I think it would bear further investigation. There are two cases that are described just like this in Connecticut and New Jersey, and where there is absentee ballot harvesting by election workers and deposited into drop boxes. So I think it would bear further investigation to see if we could identify who this person is and establish if these were legitimate ballots that she was dropping off.
Thank you. Point noted. This case will be continued to the August meeting, at which time there'll be plenty of time between now and then to further send questions to the investigative team.
I think our investigator would like to comment, Jim.
I didn't know if you wanted to hear what the investigator did for this case, though. Like, that they tried to find her. I mean, do you want me to go through what they did? Okay. So the investigator reached out to Gwinnett County Elections Director, Zach Manifold. He was shown the photo of the female, and he advised he did not know who she was. They did confirm that the lanyard appeared to be a Gwinnett County election ID. The director passed around the photo in his office, but the identity of the woman was not determined. The investigator requested the list of Gwinnett County election workers for the 2020 election, and they provided that spreadsheet. The investigator conducted a driver's license check on 293 subjects to compare the driver's photo to the security footage. The investigator located a possible match. The female was interviewed in person but ruled out she was much taller than the female in the video surveillance, and she also advised that the photo was not her, and he didn't believe so when he interviewed her. The investigator also learned of an incident where a Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office wanted poster was circulated on the internet using the photo of this female, and the incident was reported by 11 Alive News. The poster displaying the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office emblem was confirmed by a representative of the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office to be false, but the creator of the fake wanted poster was not investigated by the Sheriff's Office and not identified. But the incident didn't uncover any leads leading to the identity of the respondent as well. And when they tried to do facial recognition software, because she's wearing a mask, DMV said that they need the full face. So that was not an option for recognition software. So that is why they weren't able to identify that individual. But all that on the internet didn't lead to her identity either.
Thank you. This case has been continued till August. Let's move on in here.
Mr. Chairman, I think we want to dismiss the others except for those two. There were others that were listed.
Oh.
I think we wanted to dismiss the others, but to simply continue those two. Thank you. To continue those two, cited by me and Dr. Johnson, but to dismiss the remainders.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to dismiss the remaining respondents for SCB 2022-038, and with the one respondent being continued to August. Any discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
So this case will be continued?
The case will be continued to August for the one respondent, yes.
The two.
The two
Two respondents, yes.
Two respondents?
Yeah.
Yes, aye.
So moved. Now we'll move on to the next case, which is SCB 2023-010, Gwinnett County ineligible board member.
The Secretary of State's office opened this investigation in February of 2023 following a complaint from a Gwinnett County resident. The complaint was regarding board member Anthony Rodriguez. The complaints were regarding his attendance at board meetings, voting history during Gwinnett County election board meetings, and his personal voting record, and publicly and openly campaigning for Stacey Abrams. The complaint that had the purview of the Secretary of State's office was that of the improper campaigning activity by a county board member, a potential violation of OCGA 221-4, subsection C. The findings were the allegation that the complainant, while being on the Gwinnett County Board of Elections and Registration, publicly and openly campaigned for a particular candidate was unsubstantiated. The investigation revealed the respondent did not engage in any political activity on behalf of a candidate while conducting the duties of a Gwinnett County Board of Elections and Registration board member. The respondent is a co-founder of the theater where he was observed expressing support for the particular candidate. While showing his support, the respondent was acting in the capacity of a private citizen, appearing to be exercising his First Amendment rights. There was no evidence presented to show or prove the respondent engaged in any political activity on behalf of a candidate while in the performance of conducting board member duties.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, ask the complainant a question.
Yes.
You heard the investigation. The investigation was that the board member didn't engage in political activity for a particular candidate while serving on the county election board, but did support a candidate in that individual's private capacity outside the board member. I just want to give you a chance. Do you have any evidence to contradict that? Sure. Yeah,
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, I understand. The most frustrating thing sometimes is to say that our jurisdiction is limited, but it is. But however, I do hear you. And hold on, I do hear you, and I do agree with you. But let me finish. Let me finish. When you're winning, be quiet. And I'm hopefully you understand I'm joking. I would, Mr. Chairman, I do move to dismiss, but with a letter of instruction to the board chair that as a non-partisan, he should refrain from partisan activities in order to instill greater confidence in the people of Gwinnett County. That's my motion.
Let me understand, your motion is to not dismiss, but to offer a letter of instruction?
Yeah, offer a letter of instruction.
So we have a motion from Member Lindsay to offer a letter of instruction to this individual for SEB 2023-010. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of offering a letter of instruction on SEB 2023-010 Gwinnett County ineligible board member, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Nay.
The vote is 2 for and 1 against. The motion carries. Thank you. That concludes our portion concerning cases recommended to be dismissed. I think that it's an appropriate time to take a short lunch break. No, it's not time. What? Oh. Okay, we'll move into violation cases recommended for letters of instruction for, the first case on the agenda is SEB 2021-156, Clayton County, failure to record assistance information. I do want to say that we're going to go slightly out of order, and the last case on the agenda, SEB 2023-025, Fulton County, tabulated results will be heard immediately after lunch. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'll point of inquiry. Should we treat this, and this is truly an open question, should we treat this similar to how we treat dismissal, where there's no contention, or there's no disagreement within the board as to how to handle it, or necessity for a greater discussion? That can we simply deal with these en masse with a letter of instruction rather than going one by one? And that's a question for you and for the board. I mean, I'm sure that there may be one or two that folks want to pull to have them heard separately, but most of these would appear to be things that we could deal with en masse.
the issue is that there are respondents here that may want to respond to these.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If there is some respondent here that wants to be heard, then we should do them individually. But if there's not someone who wants to be heard, those perhaps we could simply dispose of en masse.
Are there respondents here, is there a respondent here for SEB 2021-156? We're not going to, I just want to go through the list right now and see which ones have respondents, and then we can take care of the rest of them. Okay, so that one will be heard. Is there a respondent here for SEB 2022-042? That is Bacon County. Is there a respondent here for SEB 2022-043, Fulton County, Election 9 reporting?
But just 356?
So you're 356, 370, and 043? Not 370.
Understood.
All right. Is there a respondent here for SEB 2022-090, Bibb County? Okay, that's outstanding.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Since these are all cases of violation, I think they all deserve to be heard. If whatever we do, if we dismiss, that's great for the respondent. But if we're suggesting that violations have been found, I think it's the proper thing to do to hear these cases. Some may be referred to the Attorney General, some may be issued letters of instruction or reprimand, and some may be dismissed. But I would like to hear all of them.
In which case, Mr. Chairman? One member thinks that we should hear them all? We should hear them all.
We will hear them all. Let's start with the SEB 2021-156, Clayton County, failure to record assistance information.
The investigations received a complaint that alleged that the translators who were hired by the city of Morrow to assist voters needing translation services were not properly filling out the voter assistance portion of the voters. The investigator interviewed the poll manager, Gloria Collins, who advised that she was under the impression that since the translators were hired by the city of Morrow for translation services, that they were not required to fill out the voter assistance forms. She advised that she was corrected in the sinking and will make sure they fill out the forms. The investigator interviewed the translators. Frank Soto advised that he has assisted one voter and thought since he was only helped with the initial translation at the polling location and did not help the voter cast a ballot, so he believed that he did not need to fill out the form. Tron advised that she had assisted approximately 4 to 5 people per day and did not fill out the forms. Potential violations, OCGA 21-2590, pertaining to poll officer permitting unregistered unqualified persons to vote, refusing to permit registered and qualified persons to vote, and unlawful rendering of assistance.
Is there a respondent for SEB 2021-156? Please come to podium. Oh, what desk are you at? Yeah.
Hit your button. Hit the number. No, hit the button. Should be on there. Should be on the table.
All right, you can, okay. Good afternoon now, Mr. Chair. Charles Reed for Clayton County, and I have here Elections Director Shauna Dozier, a registration manager Scott Brown, and also Ms. Collins, who's the poll manager here. For this matter, we're okay with a letter of instruction, although we do believe that there's some question as it should actually be dismissed because it's not clear that there was actually a violation of the law. First, on October 21st, 2021, because it's not clear that Director Dozier reached out to the Secretary of State's investigator, Frances Watson, via email to inquire about a sign because she had received some comments or questions from Amaro people talking about the role of the translator at the voting precinct. And she had, so after some back and forth, Investigator Watson asked whether translators were reading the ballot to those who do not speak or read English. And if so, she asked for confirmation whether the translators and poll workers were completing the assistance portion for each person that provided translation service for the ballot. Director Dozier stated, and this is all in the email, that not only had staff been trained to have anyone who assisted to sign the application, she had a staff member physically go out that day to verify that that would have been done. Mr. Scott Brown, he went to the polling location and confirmed that there was no translator that had accompanied anybody to the voting booth. He observed the translators sitting alongside the wall and not near any machine, and that there may have been some translators who assisted voters in the instruction portion prior to going to the machine, but no translator actually assisted the voter in making their vote. And at that time, because it was physical forms, they would have had to sign the form signing the oath of assistance. And Gloria, who is a longtime poll manager, she is well known for, as we say, running a tight ship. She does not let anybody just roam around. She had all of the translators sitting alongside the wall. So we do not believe that there was any issue with a translator physically walking up next to or assisting someone in actually casting their vote. And if you look at the language of 21-2409, subsection A says, no elector shall receive any assistance in voting at any primary or election unless he or she is unable to read the English language. Subsection B specifically also says any elector who is entitled to receive assistance in voting under this code section shall be permitted by the managers to select any person of the elector's choice, except such elector's employer or agent of that employer or officer or agent of such elector's union to enter the voting compartment or booth. So there's no question that none of the translators entered the compartment or booth to assist the voters, and therefore it's reasonable to believe that there was no requirement for them to sign the assistance of the oath of assistance simply by allowing them to read the instructions or help translate the instructions on giving their license or anything along those lines. But in an abundance of caution, what we have done since 2021 is that we have trained the poll managers that even if there is someone who is assisting in helping to translate the instructions, that they are also to sign the oath of assistance. And so while we would request that it be dismissed and based on that, we're okay with receiving a letter of instruction if that's the will of the board. And I have the interested parties here to answer any questions of any board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. I have one question. Did the voters need assistance in reading the ballot, actually?
In actually reading the ballot, that's
the candidates on the ballot?
Not to my knowledge. The only issue that that had come to the county or to the county's question was whether the translators had actually accompanied the voters to the booth. And we had when we went there, the poll manager said that had not happened, and there was only the initial conversations with the outside of the polling booth that the translators had assisted a handful of people.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Gazzola.
I think it's important to highlight the fact that both state and federal law require that the state allow voters to have this assistance if they need it. And I would also, I will move to issue a letter of instruction in this case. I would also ask that the Secretary of State's office or the General Counsel's office provide formal guidance to all of the counties regarding when the signature of a translator or assistant is needed, at what point in the process, so that every county is able to understand exactly what this law requires and are able to train your poll managers and poll workers accordingly early in this stage. So that was two-part, one motion and one request.
Your request will be forwarded.
Yes.
Your motion is to offer a letter of instruction
Yes.
on SEB 2021-156 Clayton County, failure to record assistance information. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of offering a letter of instruction to Clayton County on SEB 2021-156 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, so moved. The next case on the agenda is SEB 2022-042 Bacon County, intentional interference with election duties. Is there a respondent here for Bacon County? You may proceed.
It was reported that Tony Kirkland created a disturbance at a polling location during the advanced voting period. Mr. Kirkland was displeased with the ballots and how he could not just vote for anyone. There is evidence to suggest that Tony Kirkland disrupted the flow of the election when he became verbally upset, raising his voice inside of a polling location. This was witnessed by several poll staff members who claimed Mr. Kirkland's actions disrupted voters who were actively voting. It was reported that he continued to be disruptive even after the poll staff explained why he was unable to vote for a particular candidate. This occurred during the advanced voting period of May 24th, 2022 general primary election. There's evidence to suggest Tony Kirkland violated OCGA 21-2-569, interfering with poll officers.
Are there any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Were the voters unable to vote because of Mr. Kirkland?
No, it didn't say. It just says they were actively voting at the time.
Okay. And is there a definition of disruptive that is employed in the investigation?
What's the question?
I guess the question is disruptive is a descriptive term, and does that mean disruptive verbal disruption or loud speaking or actual physical act or physical behavior?
In this report, they advised that he was loud and very boisterous, but he was disruptive to the point that the voters were inquiring what was happening.
Mr. Chairman, I think even verbal disruption is not following decorum in a voting place. It's, we should be respectful and go into the voting facility, the polling place, and make our vote and leave. If there's a problem, as our code instructs, the superintendent is to be notified if there are issues and not to take out some frustration and anger on poll managers and poll clerks. So decorum is important, and elections, I know, are sometimes close and contested, but I would move that we issue a letter of instruction for Mr. Kirkland.
We have a motion to issue a letter of instruction on SEB 2022-042. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of issuing a letter of instruction on SEB 2022-042 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, so moved. Let's try and do one more before we have a break. Let's do SEB 2022-043 Fulton County election night reporting May 3, 2022.
Okay, 2022-043, Fulton County election night reporting. The Secretary of State's office investigated Fulton County after it did not submit the election results to the Secretary of State's office by the deadline and by the method dictated by the Secretary of State's election office. The results were due for the May 3rd, 2022 House District 45 special election runoff by 10 p.m. The results were not sent until May 5th, 2022 at 2:49 p.m. Nadine Williams, the director of Fulton County Elections, was asked why the results did not get submitted, and she indicated that the spreadsheet was not recognized and forwarded. Later, during the investigation, she forwarded an email to the investigator from one of her staff members, Robert Gilstrap, that showed the results being sent on May 3rd at 8:21 p.m., which is before the required deadline. However, Gilstrap sent the results to the deputy director of the SOS Elections Division and the county liaison instead of the designated email, electiondata@sos.ga.gov. So based on the evidence, this is a possible violation of SCB Rule 183-112C1C, which states in part that data shall be transmitted to the Secretary of State in a manner determined by the Secretary of State.
So there was proof that it was sent, it was just sent to the wrong place.
Yes.
Is there a respondent here on this case? Are there any other questions from the board?
How has this been corrected for future elections? Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Do we have a motion on this case?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
What is the motion?
Move for a letter of instruction.
We have a motion from Member Lindsay for a letter of instruction. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. To issue, the motion is made to offer a letter of instruction on SCB 2022-043. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? So moved by unanimous vote. Is the board's pleasure to continue or take a break? Let's move to Susan. All right. We'll now hear SCB 2022-090 Bibb County, early voting results printed.
Allegation 1, the poll watchers alleged that they witnessed the advanced voting tabulation results being printed on 3 scanners at the Bibb County Board of Election advanced voting location. The results were allegedly printed by the chief registrar and other poll workers who followed her directions. Poll watchers said this occurred while they were getting the final advanced voting numbers on May 20th, 2022. Allegation 2, a poll watcher alleged proper protocol was not followed when the poll manager printed advanced voting tabulation results on 2 scanners located at the Elaine Lucas Center advanced voting location. This allegedly occurred at the close of polls on May 20th, 2022. The investigation revealed that the tabulation results tapes were printed early at both the Bibb County Board of Election advanced voting location and the Elaine Lucas Center advanced voting location. This was witnessed by poll watchers at each of the locations who apprised the Office of the Secretary of State as to what had occurred. The individuals responsible for the tabulation results being printed early at the Bibb County Board of Election advanced voting locations were identified as a chief registrar. The individual responsible for the tabulation results being printed early at the Elaine Lucas Center was identified as a poll manager. Both admitted to printing the tabulation results early and have since been educated on the proper procedure. The investigator spoke with Bibb County election supervisor who advised that the early tabulation was a mental lapse on the part of the poll managers and had not been done in prior nor subsequent elections. The election supervisor took precautions and secured the bags containing the tabulation result tapes in a locked drawer in his office where they remained until after the close of polls on election night. The potential violations are for the Bibb County Board of Elections and Registration, Veronica Seals, former chief registrar, and Barbara White, poll manager. There's evidence to suggest that Bibb County Board of Elections and Registration and Veronica Seals violated SEB Rule 183-1-14- 0.14, subsection 5B, early absentee ballot processing. And there's evidence to suggest that Bibb County Board of Elections and Registration and Barbara White violated the same rule.
Are there any questions from the board? Is there a respondent here for this case? Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
And I have just a point of clarification, and I don't know whether you're better positioned or Investigator Koff. Just to clarify that once the tabulator tapes were printed, they were secured properly? from
Yes.
that night on until election day? Thank you. I would move at the proper time to issue a letter of instruction.
Thanks.
And yes, so I'd like to speak to that. I witnessed it, and when I was there, the manager told me that this is the way it had always been done. So I did an open records request for the 2020 early poll tapes to see what the date was on those. Bibb had not saved the early poll tapes. They were not in the proper box for open records requests. So no Bibb County resident has ever been able to see those early poll tapes after 2020. And I asked the clerk if we could get them from the Superior Court. They would not release them. So anyway, going back to 2022, we had to get our board members involved to make sure they were properly sealed. And then this has since, I haven't submitted a complaint, but this has since occurred again in this presidential preference primary at Thayer and Ussery. We have 3 early voting locations, 2 satellites and 1 being the central. So just, it seems that we're struggling with following proper protocols. And then this time also, the watcher who was there at Thayer and Ussery who reported it to me, she had been the one that also witnessed this in 2022, so she knew what needed to happen with these being properly sealed. And our supervisor did not initially tell the person to seal them. We had to get our board member involved again to get them properly sealed so that the early results couldn't be leaked.
Thank you. Any further comments from the respondent? Thank you. Any questions for the board?
Yes, a question. I'm not sure if the Secretary of State's election office has a step-by-step guideline for all election offices when there's an inadvertent closing of the polls, because that's inadvertently tabulating the results. And that should not happen in any county ever. And it happens every election. And it's a Dominion problem because it's very easy to, rather than shut down the tabulator, to close the polls. And if it's not an experienced poll manager, apparently it happens frequently enough. So I would kindly request the Secretary of State's election office provide a certified letter to every county defining the proper procedure for instructing poll managers what to do as far as shutdown versus closing, and a step-by-step guide for inadvertent closing of the polls resulting in tabulation tapes, including tape storage, memory card management, notification to the superintendent, and make a record of that action taken.
If you'll supply that recommendation to Alexandra, she'll forward that to Secretary of State.
I will do that.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Do we have your assurance that Bibb County will do remedial training for your early voting managers to ensure that this is not a recurrent event throughout the rest of the cycle?
Certainly, as attorney from the fourth ward, recommend that to the board and to the staff and practically speaking.
And if I may, first time you get a letter of instruction, second time it goes to the Attorney General. Okay.
Any further questions from the board? We have a motion.
We move that we issue a letter of instruction to Bibb County.
We have a motion to issue a letter of instruction for Bibb County. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to issue a letter of instruction to Bibb County on case SEB 2022-090. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, so moved. The chair at this point would entertain a motion to recess for 45 minutes for a lunch break.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recess 45 minutes for a lunch break.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Could the young lady who raised the complaint about Gwinnett County board member come up? Yeah, could you come up?
For those of you who are staying around, there's 2 places to eat. One's over on Washington Street. There's the Twin Towers across the street. There's an eatery in the bottom of the basement. If you guys are going to stay around, it's the easiest place to find something to eat is those 2 places.